like in mid-August, Chinese or somebody may come on out and demand that somebody make it good. They may say, according to our tradition, we want to have the head of, we want the top CEOs of these 5 firms so that we can execute them because we know we'll never get our gold, and they sold us all this fake gold. And, they shoot their own people that get out of line and let things get too deteriorated. So real soon they're going to start pressuring the U.S. to hand over these Kabbalistic criminals for execution.
Well, thank you very much, Cliff. I appreciate it, and keep up the great work.
Thank you much.
Whoops. Hi, what's your first name? Where are you calling from? Hello? Sounds like an overseas ring. Here's an email down in Missouri. In the coming food shortages, when will the average American experience a hunger problem?
Average is kind of an issue. I mean, I know people that are out of work now that are hungry. So, in terms of the middle class, I would say if you're really anticipating that, you're going to start seeing it, may personally start seeing it September-ish, and you may actually see it hit some kind of mainstream press in October.
This is from Millis, Massachusetts, and Dave. Could you please ask Mr. High what place that contrary and dissenting information has in his work? To be specific, do intimidations of catastrophes opposite, which is eco-catastrophe, get a fair reading in the production of his report, or is it a strict focus on the disastrous and only the disastrous?
It ends up being that way, but was not designed that way. Basically, what happens is this: we assigned numeric values to emotions, positive and negative, and humans seem to be expressing at this time in a more plentiful fashion negative emotions. And you'll find that people rarely are, or not as many people in the general population are expressive of positive emotions. You don't get lots of people running around having a good day saying "I love you" to everyone, even if they feel that way. We just don't support that as a cultural context. So we have a tendency to focus on the negative. We know that, and we don't really have any way of picking up the opposite because it's not really expressed.
What's your first name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Garrett, and I'm calling from Austin.
Okay, go ahead. You're on the air.
Thanks a lot. Hey, Cliff, I'm a big fan of your work. Thanks a lot for your work. I've been following you for a while now.
Okay.
I want to get your take on George's prediction about the quake on the West Coast for the next couple of weeks. That's one question I've got. Another question I've got is, how do you calculate time frames? Like, I've heard you say that you don't do numbers because that gets confusing with your work. So do you get, like months, the names of months show up in your...
No, it doesn't quite work that way. What we did originally was I sat down with all these words, 300,000 English words. I threw out a lot just because they were hardly ever used. And I would assign a value on that word as to whether it had an immediacy impact, and that immediacy impact ranged from 3 days out to 3 weeks, or if it had a short-term impact, which was the 4th week out to the end of the 3rd month, or if it had a longer-term impact, which was from the 4th month onward out to the 19th month. And I won't go into why I chose that breakdown, but basically I assigned at that point a value to these words. As those words showed up in our forecast and in the subsequent manifestation, we were able to go back and retune those and reassign their numeric value. So lots of words don't have any, especially legal words. Legal words have huge long-term impact because if someone presents you with a document filled with legal language, you can be sure you're going to be screwing with that for some period of time as a general rule. But if someone sends you a Twitter note, you know you're going to just let it go right through your mind and not even pay attention to it as a rule. Sort of make sense?
Yeah.
So when we find the words bring along with them an inherent value as to how they are emotionally impacting and for how long. And then there's these other values. The duration of the impact is different from the intensity. The intensity is different from the spread of the impact. In other words, would the impact of that word reach your family, or is it just isolated to you? And it just goes on and on and on, and it's very complex. So that's where the time values come from. Occasionally we will see lots and lots and lots of people reference something like we started, for instance, this July. So a lot of people are talking about potential problems in July. And so we deliberately screen that kind of crud out. Make sense?
Yeah, that would explain why the time component is, the less exact science part of what you do.
Sure, we're guessing. Yeah, it's a best guess we got at the moment. We try and retune, and if we had a couple of hundred years of history at this, we might get really accurate. But so far, we've only been doing it since '97, and I think in that entire time, there's probably been no more than 35 or 40 runs to retune, and I don't retune after each one because it takes a lot of work.
Right. What about the notion of this this quake in the next month or so, and the West Coast quake?
West Coast quake.
Do you have any take on that?
Yeah, I don't. West Coast quake is up for sure. It may be a subsidiary event to something happening in the larger Pacific Basin. There's a very troubling trend of earthquakes that are on a diagonal from Chile up to Japan, Kamchatka, going through areas like Tonga and around Hawaii. So I just don't like that. And if that goes, it will certainly cause problems on the West Coast. I think, though, that in the next couple of months, that's really pushing it as to whether it would occur then or if... Because, see, here's our problem. We have a huge release period that's going to happen after 4 days of a tipping point. That could be an Israeli attack in November, or it could be a big Earth event that would say the Pacific Plate cracked on November 8th, and we had earthquakes that ran through November 11th, and then for the next couple of months, everybody is running around releasing language because we think maybe the big one's passed, but we've got to deal with all of these problems. So even that would fit our November tipping point time frame. And if that's the case, then I would look for a large upthrust event on the west coast of the U.S. in November if we get further signs through the summer that the Terra entity will dominate the November tipping point. If that's the case, then we can be pretty sure that there's going to be some kind of Pacific Plate and West Coast impact. I'm hoping that it'll be that as opposed to the Israelis doing something really weird. Either way, we end up with lots of people disrupted and dead, but at least we don't have radioactivity.
Yeah. I got one more question. Can I get it in?
Go ahead.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
The theory that you and Jay Widener, and I'm sure you both have different aspects of the theory, different versions of it, but as I understand it's this notion that there are these Aryan alien creatures that are the bosses of the bosses, that are kind of hybrids of the original terraformers of the planet.
Right,
and that they're leaving and going to Mars right now to get out of the way of the solar event in 2012. But then I also hear you say that you're seeing battling going on around the periphery of our planet, and if that's the case, who would these guys be battling? Who'd be battling the guys that are leaving?
That's a real good question.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay, well, here's some things that we can be fairly evidentially supported. There seems to be evidence that in 1956 there was a breakthrough in electrogravitics within our black ops or shadow world, and since then they've been exploiting the technology as opposed to exploring it. So it may be that the Aryans are bugging out, and their minions, the shadow black ops former mob members, so to speak, are a little bit upset that the big boss has taken off and leaving these guys to suffer their fate, in which case they may be popping off at them. Or it may be some entirely unrelated other human and or alien group, for all I know, and I have reason to suspect that there's more than two groups involved, because those groups I've seen in actual confrontation kinds of situations above my head with these night vision goggles. Both groups flee like mad when these light pulse ships come through, and it's the strangest thing in the world to watch. These little Delta craft go into huge evasive maneuvers when one of these whatevers comes popping through our near Earth orbit and heading out to some other spot. And these light ships are just really strange things to look at. It's not like a regular UFO. It's like a spot of light is created. You just see the light occur, like all of a sudden a flash bulb up in space, and then instantly right behind it you see a quasi-metallic teardrop shape of a thing that seems to jump into the light, and then the next thing you know, that light has progressed along in a track and it does it all over again a few dozen times, and it's all of a sudden gone past your head. But as soon as it appears, these triangles and big box things go scooting off every which way, trying to get out of there. And these were formerly fighting each other, so it's as though, you know, two kids are in there scruffing around, and here comes mom or dad, and they stop that.
Well, are you looking through a telescope? I mean,
I don't have.
How you seen these things? I would think they'd be so far away you wouldn't be able to. It'd be hard to differentiate.
Well, here's the deal. I have 3 magnification. I think Jay has 8 magnification. So with 8 magnification goggles, he can see out about 500 miles. You got to be real. You have to understand how these things work.
Night vision goggles, 500 miles.
Yeah, because on a clear night.
Wow.
Because of course what they're doing is they're amplifying non-photonic energies. And so that you get this green screen effect, but mine only go out maybe 150 to 200 miles, and I'm trying to figure out a way to attach them to a spotting scope. Some of the 4th generation ones have a 60 power scope behind them, but they're fantastically expensive. So there's that